The old janitor dropped a stack of files in the middle of the hallway. More than 30 employees walked past him without stopping. Some stepped around the papers. Some pretended not to see him. One even laughed. Then a young trainee girl rushed over, knelt on the floor, and helped him gather every single page. She had no idea that the tired-looking janitor was actually the billionaire CEO who owned the entire company, and that her simple act of kindness was about to change both of their lives forever. Richard Hayes had spent 22 years building Hayes Technologies from nothing. He still remembered the tiny garage where it all started. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The heating barely worked during winter. Most days he survived on cheap coffee and instant noodles while writing code late into the night. Back then, he knew every employee personally. There were only 4 of them. They shared meals together. They celebrated every small victory. When someone struggled, everyone helped. Those early years had been difficult, but they had also been honest. Now the company occupied a gleaming 40-story headquarters in the center of the city. Thousands of employees worked there. Revenues reached billions of dollars annually. From the outside, everything appeared perfect. Yet something felt wrong. For months, reports had crossed Richard's desk that disturbed him. Employee turnover was increasing. Customer satisfaction scores had begun slipping. Anonymous surveys contained troubling comments. People spoke about toxic managers. They complained about disrespect. Some mentioned feeling invisible. Whenever Richard questioned senior leadership, the answers were always the same. Nothing unusual. Growing pains. Every large company faces these issues. But Richard wasn't convinced. Numbers told stories, and the numbers suggested a deeper problem. The company he loved seemed to be changing into something he no longer recognized. So he made a decision. Instead of relying on reports and presentations, he would discover the truth himself. Nobody except his assistant, Margaret, and the chairman of the board knew about his plan. For 1 week, he would disappear. No luxury office, no executive meetings, no title, no authority. He would become someone people normally ignored. A janitor. Monday morning arrived sooner than expected. Richard stood in front of a mirror inside a small apartment the company secretly rented for the experiment. The transformation shocked even him. His expensive haircut had been altered to look uneven and ordinary. A pair of glasses changed the shape of his face. Artificial wrinkles made him appear older. The elegant CEO who appeared on magazine covers was gone. In his place stood a tired maintenance worker wearing a faded uniform. Margaret handed him a cleaning cart. "You still have time to cancel." Richard shook his head. "No," she smiled. "Then good luck." At exactly 7 o'clock, Richard entered his own headquarters through the service entrance. For the first time in years, nobody greeted him. Nobody rushed to open doors. Nobody asked for his opinion. Nobody cared he existed. The experience felt strangely freeing. And strangely painful. His supervisor for the week, an actual facilities manager named Carl, welcomed him. Carl had no idea who Richard really was. "You're the new temporary hire." "That's right." Carl pointed toward several hallways. "Bathrooms first, then conference rooms." Richard nodded. "Got it." The morning began quietly. At first, everything seemed normal. Employees arrived carrying coffee cups and laptops. Most looked busy. Many appeared stressed. Richard understood. Work was demanding. But as the hours passed, he noticed something troubling. Very few people acknowledged support staff. Receptionists greeted employees cheerfully. Most received no response. Security guards opened doors. Many people walked through without saying thank you. Cleaning crews emptied trash bins while employees talked around them as if they were invisible. By 10 o'clock, Richard had heard more rude comments than he expected. "Can you clean this? Move that cart. You're blocking the way." None of those statements bothered him. What bothered him was how they were delivered. "No please. No thank you. No eye contact." The janitor wasn't being treated like a person. He was being treated like part of the furniture. Around noon, Richard carried a heavy box filled with printer supplies down the main hallway. The box wasn't impossibly heavy, but it was awkward. As he approached the elevators, a group of employees rushed past. One shoulder accidentally bumped into him. The box slipped. Papers exploded across the floor. Folders scattered in every direction. For a moment, Richard remained frozen. Then he watched what happened next. People kept walking. Some glanced down before continuing. Others stepped over documents. One man frowned as though Richard had inconvenienced him. Not a single person stopped. Then he heard a voice. "Oh my goodness." A young woman hurried across the hallway. Without hesitation, she dropped to her knees and began collecting papers. "Are you okay?" she asked. Richard blinked. Yes. That looked painful. Together they gathered documents from the floor. The young woman moved quickly, carefully organizing papers into neat stacks. Richard studied her face. She appeared young, early 20s, professional but not flashy. There was a sincerity in her expression that immediately stood out. "Thank you," Richard said. She smiled. Of course. When they finished, she noticed him adjusting the heavy box again. "Do you need help carrying that?" Richard laughed softly. "I think I've got it." "You sure?" "Positive." She extended her hand. "I'm Emma." "Richard." She shook his hand warmly. "Nice to meet you." Then she glanced toward the box. "Please be careful." Before walking away, she added something unexpected. "And don't skip lunch. You look exhausted." Richard watched her disappear into the crowd. For the first time all day, he smiled. The interaction lasted less than 3 minutes. Yet it felt more genuine than many executive conversations he'd experienced recently. Over the next several days, he noticed Emma repeatedly. Not because he was searching for her. Because she consistently behaved differently from everyone else. Tuesday morning she greeted the security guard by name. A few minutes later she thanked a receptionist for helping her locate a meeting room. At lunch she carried her own tray to the return station instead of leaving it on the table. Small actions. Simple actions. Yet surprisingly rare. Many employees treated support staff as background characters. Emma treated them as equals. Late Tuesday afternoon Richard was cleaning windows near the marketing department when he overheard a conversation. Two managers were discussing a recent promotion. The promoted employee wasn't present. Neither manager realized Richard could hear them. He only got promoted because senior leadership likes him. Exactly. He isn't even the best performer. The casual cynicism surprised Richard. Years earlier, ambition had energized the company. Now resentment seemed to be spreading. When the conversation ended, Emma approached carrying several reports. One folder slipped from her hands. Immediately Richard bent down to help. She laughed. "Now we're even. Even. You helped me. You helped me first." Emma smiled. "Fair enough." The conversation lasted only seconds. Yet Richard noticed something important. She spoke to him exactly the same way she spoke to everyone else. No condescension. No fake politeness. No hidden agenda. Just simple respect. Wednesday brought a moment Richard would never forget. The company cafeteria buzzed with activity. Employees filled tables while discussing projects and deadlines. Richard was wiping down a nearby counter when senior executive Trevor Mills entered. Trevor was famous throughout the organization. His division generated impressive profits. Senior leadership praised him constantly. But during the week, Richard had observed troubling behavior. Trevor interrupted people, dismissed junior employees, took credit for team achievements, and frequently treated support staff poorly. As Trevor carried his lunch toward a table, a sandwich wrapper slipped from his tray. It landed beside his chair. He looked down, then looked directly at Richard. "You missed something." Several employees glanced toward them. Richard walked over calmly. "The trash can is right beside you." Trevor stared. "What?" "The trash can." Richard pointed toward it. "It's closer to you than it is to me." The surrounding tables fell silent. Nobody spoke to Trevor that way. Nobody. Trevor slowly stood. His expression darkened. "Your job is cleaning." Richard remained calm. "And your job is leadership." The silence deepened. People exchanged nervous looks. Then a voice cut through the tension. "He's right." Everyone turned. Emma sat 3 tables away. Trevor's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" Emma swallowed visibly. For a second Richard thought she might back down. Instead she sat straighter. "I said he's right." The entire cafeteria froze. Even the kitchen staff stopped moving. Trevor possessed enormous influence. Challenging him publicly was dangerous. Especially for a trainee. Yet Emma continued. "Picking up your own trash isn't difficult." Trevor stared in disbelief. "You've worked here less than a month." "That's true. Then maybe you should focus on learning." Emma's cheeks turned red. But she refused to retreat. "I'm learning a lot." Several employees lowered their eyes. Nobody wanted to be associated with the confrontation. Trevor glared at both of them. Finally he grabbed the wrapper, threw it away, and stormed out. Conversations remained silent for several moments. Then people slowly resumed eating. Richard looked toward Emma. She seemed shaken, yet she didn't appear regretful. That evening he found her sitting alone near the lobby. The building had mostly emptied. Outside, city lights reflected against glass towers. Inside, the atmosphere felt unusually peaceful. "Mind if I sit?" Richard asked. Emma shrugged. "Sure." For a few minutes neither spoke. Then Richard asked quietly, "Rough day?" Emma laughed weakly. "You could say that. Because of Trevor." She nodded. "Probably wasn't the smartest career move." Richard leaned back. "You defended someone." "Maybe." She looked toward the windows. "My grandfather always told me something." "What?" He said the easiest way to understand someone's character is to watch how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Richard felt his chest tighten. The statement perfectly described why he started the undercover experiment. Emma continued. "He used to own a small grocery store." "What was he like?" Her face softened instantly. "The kindest man I've ever known." For nearly an hour they talked. She told him about growing up in a small town. About losing her father when she was 13. About helping her mother pay bills. About working evenings while attending college. She described sleepless nights studying for exams. Multiple part-time jobs. Scholarship applications. Endless sacrifices. Yet despite everything, she never sounded bitter. What impressed Richard most wasn't her intelligence. Though she was clearly intelligent. It wasn't her work ethic. Though she worked harder than many employees. It was her perspective. She still believed people deserved kindness. The world had given her plenty of reasons to become cynical. She refused. When they finally stood to leave, Emma smiled. "You know something." "What?" "You're probably the nicest person I've met in this building." Richard nearly laughed. If she knew the truth, she would be horrified. Or maybe amused. Either way, she had no idea she was talking to the founder and CEO. As she disappeared through the revolving doors, Richard remained in the lobby. Watching, thinking, reflecting. For 3 days he had observed hundreds of employees. Many were talented, many were ambitious, some were genuinely good people. But only one person consistently treated everyone with dignity regardless of status. Only one person defended a janitor when doing so carried risk. Only one person seemed completely unchanged by titles, hierarchy, or power. And that person was a trainee who had been with the company for less than a month. Richard looked around the massive headquarters he had spent decades building. The building was beautiful. The profits were impressive. The reputation was strong. Yet for the first time, he realized something. A company's true culture wasn't defined by mission statements hanging on walls. It was defined by moments nobody thought mattered. A greeting, a thank you, a helping hand, a choice to show respect when there was nothing to gain. And so far, Emma Carter was the only employee who seemed to understand that. What Richard didn't know yet was that the biggest test of her character, and the biggest surprise of his entire undercover experiment, was still waiting just around the corner. The young trainee stood frozen in the packed auditorium as the company's billionaire CEO walked onto the stage. Her heart nearly stopped when he smiled directly at her and said, "There's only one reason I'm standing here today. Because one person in this company remembered how to treat a human being." What happened next would leave hundreds of employees speechless. Friday morning arrived with an unusual tension hanging over the headquarters. Employees hurried through the lobby carrying coffee cups and laptops, unaware that this ordinary day was about to become one of the most talked about moments in company history. For Richard Hayes, the week had felt longer than any quarter he had ever managed as CEO. He had cleaned conference rooms, emptied trash bins, mopped floors, restocked supplies. Most importantly, he had watched. He had seen the company through invisible eyes. The experience had changed him. Some discoveries had disappointed him. Others had broken his heart. But one had given him hope. Emma Carter. As Richard pushed his cleaning cart through the hallway that morning, he noticed the familiar patterns repeating themselves. Employees rushed past without acknowledgement. Managers barked instructions. Support staff remained largely unseen. Yet Emma was exactly the same as she had been on Monday. She greeted the receptionist, thanked the security guard, held an elevator door for a maintenance worker carrying equipment. She wasn't performing kindness. She simply lived it. Around 10 o'clock, Richard witnessed something that strengthened his opinion of her even further. A nervous intern accidentally spilled coffee across a conference table just before an important meeting. The young man looked terrified. Several employees immediately began criticizing him. How careless can you be? Do you know how expensive this equipment is? Unbelievable. The intern's face turned pale. His hands shook. Richard could see he was moments away from panic. Then Emma stepped forward. Everybody relax. The room became quiet. She grabbed paper towels and began helping clean the mess. It was an accident. One employee rolled his eyes. That's easy for you to say. Emma looked directly at him. Have you never made a mistake? The employee said nothing. Within minutes, the spill was cleaned. The equipment was unharmed. The crisis disappeared. As people returned to work, the intern quietly approached Emma. Richard overheard him whisper, "Thank you." Emma smiled. "No problem." The young man looked emotional. "You saved me." She shook her head. "No, you just needed someone on your side." The words lingered in Richard's mind. You just needed someone on your side. How many people felt alone inside this company? How many talented employees struggled because nobody showed them basic encouragement? At noon, Richard returned his cleaning supplies to the maintenance room. The undercover experiment was officially over. Carl, the facilities manager, approached him. "Not bad for your first week." Richard smiled. "I learned a lot." Carl laughed. "This place will teach you things." "Yes," Richard said quietly. "It definitely will." A few hours later, preparations began for a company-wide town hall meeting. Employees filled the massive auditorium. More than 1,000 people took their seats. Executives occupied the front rows. Managers clustered together. Conversations buzzed throughout the room. Emma sat near the middle. She expected another routine corporate presentation. Financial updates, future goals, leadership announcements. Nothing unusual. As the lights dimmed, a senior executive walked onto the stage. "Good afternoon, everyone." The crowd applauded politely. The executive smiled. "Before today's agenda begins, we have a special presentation." Employees exchanged curious glances. Special presentations were rare. Over the past week, our CEO has been conducting an important leadership initiative. Confusion spread across the audience. Emma barely paid attention. She opened her notebook. Then the large screen behind the stage lit up. A photograph appeared. It showed a janitor pushing a cleaning cart. Emma frowned. The man looked familiar. Very familiar. A second photograph appeared. Then a third. Suddenly her stomach tightened. The janitor. Richard. The kind maintenance worker she had spoken with all week. The room erupted into whispers. People stared at the screen in disbelief. Then the side doors opened. Richard Hayes walked onto the stage wearing a tailored suit. The disguise was gone. The artificial wrinkles were gone. The glasses were gone. Gasps echoed throughout the auditorium. Emma's eyes widened. Her notebook slipped from her hands. "No way," she whispered. Around her, employees looked equally stunned. Some appeared horrified. Others looked confused. Several managers turned pale. Richard approached the podium. The room became silent. For a moment he simply looked at the audience. Then he spoke. "For 1 week, I worked in this building as a janitor. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. You walked past me in hallways." His voice remained calm. "You passed me in elevators. The silence deepened. You saw me cleaning your offices." Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Richard continued. "Many of you never knew who I was." A nervous laugh escaped somewhere in the crowd. Nobody joined it. That was the point. The giant screen displayed images from the week. Richard carrying supplies, cleaning conference rooms, mopping floors, working alongside maintenance staff. Then his expression became serious. "What I discovered concerns me." Employees sat perfectly still. I witnessed disrespect. Another image appeared. A janitor emptying trash while employees ignored him. I witnessed arrogance. Another photograph. Workers leaving messes for others to clean. I witnessed people treating support staff as though they were invisible. The room felt painfully quiet. Richard paused. Then he said something that made many people lower their heads. Some of the worst behavior came from people in leadership positions. Several executives visibly stiffened. Nobody knew where to look. Richard wasn't angry. That somehow made his words more powerful. He sounded disappointed, and disappointment is harder to hear than anger. For several seconds he allowed the silence to linger. Then his expression softened. But that's not the whole story. The screen changed. A photograph of Emma appeared. The audience turned toward her section. Emma looked completely shocked. Her face turned bright red. Richard smiled. Because during this week, one person reminded me what this company should be. Every eye in the auditorium focused on Emma. She wished she could disappear. Richard continued. This employee helped a janitor pick up papers when everyone else walked away. A photograph appeared showing Emma kneeling on the floor. Murmurs spread through the audience. She thanked people others ignored. Another image. Emma speaking with a receptionist. She defended someone who had no power. The cafeteria photograph appeared. Trevor Mills visibly sank into his chair. And she treated every person she met with dignity. Emma felt tears forming unexpectedly. Richard looked directly at her. Emma Carter, would you please come to the stage? The entire auditorium erupted into applause. Emma froze. The woman beside her nudged her. Gently. Go. Still stunned, Emma slowly stood. The applause grew louder. Some employees rose to their feet. Then more joined. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was standing. A thunderous ovation filled the room. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she walked toward the stage. When she reached Richard, she looked completely overwhelmed. You tricked me, she whispered. Richard laughed. Technically, yes. The audience laughed with him. Then Richard faced the crowd. This young woman has worked here less than a month. The room quieted, yet she demonstrated more leadership than many people with executive titles. A few executives looked down. Richard continued. Leadership is not authority. Silence. Leadership is not a corner office. More silence. Leadership is how you treat people when there's nothing to gain. The words echoed through the auditorium. Richard turned toward Emma. You never knew who I was. She shook her head. No, you thought I was a janitor. Yes. Why were you kind to me? Emma hesitated. Hundreds of people watched. Thousands more viewed remotely. Finally she answered. Because you were a person. The room became completely silent. Richard smiled. Exactly. Several employees wiped tears from their eyes. The simplicity of the answer made it even more powerful. Because you were a person. Nothing more needed to be said. Richard reached into his jacket pocket. I have another announcement. Curiosity spread throughout the auditorium. Effective immediately, Emma Carter is being promoted. Emma's eyes widened. What? The audience laughed. Richard grinned. You identified a financial error that saved this company millions of dollars. Shock spread across the room. Many employees had never heard that story. Richard continued. And someone else took credit. Several heads slowly turned toward Emma's supervisor. His face became pale. I reviewed the evidence personally. The auditorium remained silent. The discovery belonged to Emma. Applause erupted again. Emma looked stunned. Richard handed her a folder. Your promotion package. She stared at it, speechless. And because talent should be rewarded, it includes a significant salary increase. The crowd cheered. Emma covered her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But Richard wasn't finished. He turned back toward the audience. As for the rest of us, including myself, we have work to do. The giant screen displayed new company initiatives. Leadership accountability programs, respect training, anonymous reporting systems, recognition awards for support staff, mentorship opportunities. Richard had spent the previous night creating a plan. The company would change, not because a consultant recommended it, not because public relations demanded it, because it was necessary. When people feel respected, Richard said, they perform better. Heads nodded. When people feel valued, they contribute more. More nods. When people feel human, companies thrive. The applause started before he finished speaking. And this time it lasted several minutes. Months later, the story remained legendary inside Hayes Technologies. The culture slowly improved. Managers became more accountable. Employees treated support staff differently. Not perfectly, but noticeably. And Emma, her career flourished. Not because she impressed the CEO. Not because she sought attention. Not because she chased recognition. She succeeded because character has a way of revealing itself over time. One evening nearly a year later, Emma sat in Richard's office discussing a major project. As the meeting ended, Richard smiled. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me?" Emma laughed. "You mean when I thought you were a janitor?" "Yes." She thought for a moment. "I asked if you were okay." Richard nodded. "Exactly." He looked out the window at the city skyline. Then back at Emma. "Funny how one simple question changed everything." Emma smiled. "No." Richard raised an eyebrow. "No." She shook her head. "It wasn't the question." "What was it?" Emma's answer came instantly. "The choice." Richard smiled. Because she was right. The papers on the floor. The spilled coffee. The forgotten janitor. The frightened intern. Every moment came down to a choice. A choice to care. A choice to notice. A choice to treat another human being with dignity. And in the end, that simple choice had transformed far more than one career. It had transformed an entire company.